Change leaders embed structural resilience. Leadership learning. On 17 October 1931, Al Capone was convicted of income tax evasion, demonstrating that even the most powerful organizations can fall through systemic weaknesses. He was found guilty on several counts of failing to pay tax on income earned illegally and was sentenced to 11 years in prison, fined $50,000 plus court costs, and held liable for back taxes and interest. Capone had long wielded political influence, controlled local law enforcement, intimidated witnesses, and paid bribes to secure impunity. His criminal enterprise flourished under Prohibition, with organized operations in gambling, bootlegging, and extortion. The federal government, however, marshaled the power of tax law to bypass the more violent crimes that proved harder to prosecute. The U.S. Treasury's Special Intelligence Unit, led by agents who traced his extravagant spending and linked it to unreported income, eventually erected a case too strong to evade. In the courtroom, the presiding judge quietly replaced a jury to forestall tampering and discarded a plea bargain Capone thought would deliver a lighter sentence. The result was a blow to the myth of invincibility that criminal organizations often cultivate. Although Capone's name is long associated with gangland violence, his downfall underscores that no system, however powerful, is immune from internal vulnerabilities. Corruption, intimidation, or dominance do not safeguard an organization from cumulative neglect of oversight, accountability, or legal constraints. The weight of unexamined risk, financial opacity, and overreach can erode legitimacy and expose even mighty structures to collapse. That historical moment invites reflection on change leadership. Capone's empire was sustained by fear, informal power, and the suppression of dissent, yet those same forces concealed its fragility and prevented adaptive correction. When external scrutiny intensified, the weaknesses internalized over years were exposed and the structure crumbled. In many organizations, overly centralized authority and cultural immunity to scrutiny may ensure short-term stability, but they conceal systemic brittleness. Over time, Capone's incarceration and the public spectacle of his downfall reshaped the narrative of law enforcement capability. It demonstrated that even the most deeply entrenched power can be challenged when institutions muster expertise, perseverance, and the will to enforce accountability. The case became emblematic of how a rule of law system could triumph over brute force. This episode demonstrates that dominance built on secrecy and impunity is inherently fragile. It reminds us that systemic integrity, transparency, and vigilance are essential to correct internal weakness before external forces intervene. That is a powerful lesson for change leadership. Change leadership lessons. These historical insights translate directly into contemporary change leadership imperatives that demand structural vigilance and systemic accountability. The downfall of Capone's empire highlights the need for systemic integrity, transparency, and vigilance to address weaknesses before external enforcement intervenes. Leaders of change embed accountability by replacing secrecy with clear structures that ensure responsibility cannot be bypassed. They insist on transparency, knowing that hidden practices weaken trust and can ultimately destroy institutions. Change leaders guard procedural integrity by ensuring that systems are resilient against manipulation and maintain fairness in all circumstances. They build structural resilience through reinforcing governance frameworks that strengthen organizations beyond the influence of any single individual. Leaders of change phase out privilege gradually, rebalancing influence to sustain equity and embed long-term cultural transformation within the organization. Summary leadership quote: change leaders replace secrecy with accountability, protect processes from manipulation, and dismantle privilege through structural resilience to avoid corporate failure. Application: change leadership responsibility. 3. Intervene to ensure sustainable change. The downfall of Al Capone's empire illustrates how leaders must intervene to ensure sustainable change when hidden weaknesses threaten organizational integrity. This responsibility demands vigilance and decisive action to expose and correct systemic fragility before external forces impose accountability through the erosion of trust and governance. To intervene effectively, change leaders must go beyond surface-level reforms and confront the deeper structural causes of organizational vulnerability. This involves strengthening governance frameworks, embedding transparent decision-making, institutionalizing compliance and accountability mechanisms that resist distortion or undue influence. In modern organizations, this responsibility manifests when informal power networks or legacy hierarchies undermine fairness and adaptability. The intervention imperative requires courage to dismantle entrenched privilege and replace it with resilient systems that sustain equity and integrity. Leaders should intervene to ensure sustainable change turns accountability, transparency, and structural resilience into enduring capabilities that safeguard the organization and sustain change success. Leadership of change, final thoughts. In an era where artificial intelligence accelerates organizational complexity, the imperative for structural resilience and transparent governance becomes exponentially more critical. Effective leaders embed adaptive accountability systems that evolve with technological transformation while safeguarding human-centered integrity. True change leaders understand that sustainable success depends not on concentrated control, but on distributed resilience that endures both internal fragility and external disruption. Find out more. Change Management Leadership, Leadership of Change, Volume 4,